and welcome to another Americans for Limited Government live stream. Joining us today is Richard Manning, the president of Americans for Limited Government. Rick, over the weekend, President Trump gave a rally in Florence, Arizona, that people are talking about today. They're saying that it could be the soft launch for his 2024 presidential comeback. And President Trump even used the words, he said, we're going to see a comeback, the likes of which you've never seen before. I have a short clip that we can watch of the rally, and then I want to hear your thoughts and I guess go more further into the question of will he run? And if he does, what should his policy priorities be? So let's get right to the video, folks. And thanks for joining us. And make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you get all the notifications of when we go live.
I think it's one of the reasons that Carrie, because I watched her on the stump the other day, and I think it's one of the reasons she's doing so well. But I said if they get elected, our country would become a large-scale version of Venezuela, remember? And I didn't really, I said it, and I meant it a little bit. Guess what? It's true. We're becoming a large-scale version of Venezuela, which was a very successful country 20 years ago, and now they have no food, they have no water, everybody's dying. It's being run by a horrible group of killers, and we have a horrible group. People ask me often, President, could I ask you a question? What was the toughest country? And they're so interested. We've made people very interested in politics, right? Very, very interested. What was the toughest country to deal with? Was it Russia? Sir, could it be China or perhaps North Korea? Was it Iran? I said, no, the toughest country to deal with was the United States of America. We have some crazy people where they create the Russia hoax and all created, all fabricated. And actually the toughest country to deal with is not China or Russia, it's the United States. It's a disgrace. And you notice we don't talk about greatness anymore. We talk about the environment. We talk about COVID, the China virus. We talk about race. We talk about all this. We never talk about greatness anymore. Other countries are talking about their military and their power and their this and their that. We don't talk about greatness anymore as a country. You turn on the news and watch these fakers. They're fakers. You turn on the fake news at night and you watch what they talk about. It's all things that it's just not possible. And a country has to be thinking to the future. It has to be thinking about greatness. And we don't even think about it anymore. We don't think about it. And it's very sad. And we are going to.
All right, Rick. So a lot of it seemed like classic Trump talking about American greatness. I personally loved what he had to say. Do you have any reaction?
Yeah, he's exactly right. The fact is we don't talk about greatness anymore. What we talk about is making do. We'll have to just lower expectations. We'll have to be just accept that shelves are going to be empty at times. And maybe we're going to be constantly being bounced back and forth by a virus, and that we're going to be needing to get jabbed every 6 months, whether we want to or not, and anybody who stands up will be persecuted, essentially, lose their job. That's the Biden America. The Biden America is a Jimmy Carter America, where a malaise set over the country because we just got out of Vietnam War, and we had just we kind of were questioning ourselves. But remember, when we came out of Jimmy Carter, we got Ronald Reagan. And America doesn't view itself as a place where we endure shortages. We know that we're a place that produces abundance. And we don't sit there and accept politicians who want to limit us in terms of our possibilities. We want people who are going to get out of the way so that we can take advantage of those possibilities and those opportunities to make things happen. We want a country that knows that the individuals, the people, are the ones who are the font of our wealth and the font of our greatness, as opposed to the government being the one that determines who gets what, and who gets to have an opportunity to be great and who doesn't. That's America. America is a place of a shining beacon on a hill, and Joe Biden is trying to put a big cloth over that beacon. And thank goodness that Donald Trump got up and said, "Hey, listen, they don't talk about greatness anymore because that's not what they aspire to."
Rick, Chica Sharon Bishop says he enticed the crowd with a teaser. She loves Donald J. Trump, America's president for the citizens. I agree with you, Chica. What I love about Donald Trump, and I've been at a couple of his rallies in person, is whether I'm watching him in person or just, on a screen, he always connects with me. Like, I really feel like he's speaking personally to me. And I think that's one of his geniuses, is that ability to connect with Americans in a very personal way. And Joe Biden simply does not do that. Like, he doesn't do it for me. I can't imagine that he's making any connections with anyone. It's such a contrast when you see President Trump get up there and speak. And he's still just so energetic. It's just, he really is engaging. He pulls you in. And I hope, personally, I do hope he runs again. Rick, if he runs again, what do you think he ought to focus on? What should his legislative priorities be?
Yeah, and I'll go to what you were talking about beforehand, and then I'll talk about legislative priorities. You're right. He's charismatic, and he presents a positive vision. He presents a vision for the future that is makes people have hope, as opposed to one that says, "Well, just deal with it. Things are going to be crummy. Just deal with it." Americans don't deal with things being crummy. Americans expect things to be better. When it's said that Boris Yeltsin, who at the time was leader in the Communist Party in the Soviet Union, mayor of Moscow, later became president of the Russian Federation, was traveling in Houston, Texas. And he thought he was and he went off schedule. He went to a Russell's shopping center, grocery mart, and was astonished at the abundance on the shelves. Any kind of vegetable you'd want, any kind of, anything you wanted was available at the grocery store. So much so that he said, not even members of the Politburo, which were the elite, the Congress of Russia, of the Soviet Union, not even members of the Politburo have this abundance. And yet every American does. And that's when he knew that the Soviet Union was going to fall and America was going to move forward. That's when intellectually, that's when psychologically, in Boris Yeltsin's mind, the Soviet Union fell, because they could never match the abundance with all the 5-year plans in the world that America has. Today, our shelves look more like the Soviet Union shelves than like the American shelves of 1980, 1978, I guess it was. And it was and so we have a problem, but Americans know that the system, the free enterprise system, creates abundance if only we'll get the federal government out of the way. And in terms of issues that he needs to talk about, I think he needs to go and offer a message of hope. But he also has to be pretty sharp and pointed about some of the failings of the Biden administration and some of the places that reversed his policies and have caused massive problems. The 3 issues I'd look at most would be trade, because ultimately, if we don't solve the China problem, the rest of it doesn't matter. And so we have to solve the China problem. And there's a lot of things that are going to happen as a result of some of the airports and air flights being canceled out of Shanghai and the like, that are going to cause markets to force manufacturing out of China. But ultimately, our China problem right now is a domestic problem. It's in the ports of Los Angeles, ports of Long Beach, where 40% of our imports come in, and we can't get the ships into port, and we can't get them unloaded in a timely fashion. That's our China problem right now. It's manifesting on our own shores. But ultimately, we have to deal with trade with China. We have to get manufacturing back growing here in America. We have to be able to have manufacturing on this side of the Pacific Ocean, and part of that goes to the second problem is the border. We just can't continue. The open border that Joe Biden has created has led to a dramatic increase in fentanyl deaths. It has led to a gang warfare on the streets of most of the cities in our country and a dramatic spike on the homicide rate. It has led to more misery and despair due to drug addiction than anything you can imagine. And it's a bald-faced admission that human trafficking is okay because we sanction it by allowing human traffickers to bring people into this country and use them as slaves. Because quite honestly, our government doesn't care. They don't care about protecting our own borders. We have to be able to protect our own borders. We have to be able to protect our own property. A government that can't protect its borders is not a government at all. And that a country that can't protect its borders is not a country. So we have to do that. Donald Trump has the chops to get it done. He knows the opposition he faced before, and they will not be able to play those same tricks on him again because he knows what they did and he knows what he needs to do to get it fixed. So we have to fix immigration. And the third one is one that he wasn't successful in doing much about, and that is draining the swamp. Now that he's experienced what the swamp is like, now that he's felt the full wrath of the swamp, I don't think there's going to be anybody to talk him into not pursuing some pretty aggressive, but yet simple reforms of the civil service system that will, in fact, have the effect of allowing the swamp to be drained, because it allow people to be fired in the civil service in a more rapid fashion than they can now. And if you can't fire people for not doing their job, you can't drain the swamp. And so I think he's going to be pursuing that. I think he'll be pursuing, if it were me, I would lay off 10% of the federal workforce day one. I just reduction in force, and 10% might be light. I would offer incentives for people to retire out and try to get as many of the people who were made a living basically blocking Trump policies, incentivize them to get out. And if they don't get out, then transfer them somewhere in the country that they don't want to be in, and give them and get them gone. Because ultimately, he has to have people working the federal bureaucracy who support the Trump agenda. And that draining the swamp includes firing every single person in the National Security Council from day one and re-interviewing them for their jobs along with others and making them compete for their jobs. That just because you were in the National Security Council under Biden doesn't mean you get to be in the National Security Council under Trump. And the fact of the matter is, the National Security Council under Obama, the holdovers from that National Security Council leaked against Trump, did everything they could to block Trump policies. They were not advisors to the president. They were actually opponents sitting inside the wire. And he needs a national security team that is going to be supporting the Trump administration's policies, at the very least, not overtly opposing them and doing everything they can to just undermine them. So those are the things I would do right off the bat. If I were President Trump, I'd run on those things. I'd drive those points home, because ultimately it comes down to good paying jobs, fixing the administrative state so America runs again properly, and fixing the border so we get rid of the crime, and we don't have people coming across, dramatically lowering the base salary levels of people here in America, because labor competes, and that's why business likes illegal immigration, because they want cheap labor. Well, too bad.
Rick, Judy says, we are dying out here. They're coming after us. 50% of Dems think we should have our kids taken away and put in prison. What she's talking about there is a poll that just was released today. It's been in the news. It's a really crazy poll, and I'm pretty sure that's what Judy's referring to, that shows like 51% of Biden supporters think that the children of unvaccinated adults should be removed from their home. and just some other insane findings that show you what I think many people are viewing as some sort of a mental illness on the part of some of these far left Biden supporters. And I mean, I think Judy's reacting to that. Our country is so divided. When you see polls like that, it's very upsetting.
Yeah, it's the Biden administration has made a policy of trying to create, make it so people are conservative or people who don't trust the vaccine, want to control their own healthcare choices, are seen as dangerous and the other, whether it's from the attempt to make all Trump supporters appear to be, because you're a Trump supporter, to be some kind of person who wants to create a quote unquote insurrection, or if it's dealing with the vaccines, the vaccine mandates, the mask policies, the things that actually, when you find out what Fauci actually was saying behind closed doors, you discover that the people, we were right all along. But that's not what some people have been fed. And it's really hard to recover and to reunite a nation when the president of the United States is declaring that the people who oppose his policies are not only unpatriotic, but are deserving of ostracization from society.
Right. So
And that's what Biden's doing. And we have to stand up against that. And that's one of the things that I think has contributed to Biden's record low 33% approval rating, because he was supposed to be a uniter. And the only thing he seems to be uniting people about is we're united that we don't like him.
Right. Our friends at Red Pill News followed up with Judy's comment. So it's a Rasmussen poll that was looking at how Democrats versus Republicans look at the vaccine mandates. And Rasmussen asked people if they favor home confinement for those who are not vaccinated. On the GOP side, 79% were opposed, while 59% of Democrats favored that. Can you imagine? 59% of Democrats think that unvaccinated Americans should be shoved off and locked up in their homes. I mean, where's the science? Haven't they been following what's going on with this Omicron variant? People who are fully vaxxed and boosted are getting it and spreading it. How can you possibly think that it's appropriate to lock people up in their homes because they're vaccinated?
There's a level of ignorance on the left that's almost stunning.
Yeah.
You look at this, and I bet you, I did not see the poll, but if I would bet you that a question about some things like what percentage of the people who get the virus die, that you'd get an extraordinarily high number from the Democrats. You get a number that was actually real from the Republican side. If you assume that COVID is death, as the Democrats were told for a year and a half, right. And they're finally coming off that narrative now. If you assume that COVID is death, and you get it, you're going to die. You know what? People then say we got to take whatever measures are necessary to stop it, and it is but if you realize what the real numbers are in COVID, you have a more rational point of view, and you're not driven as much by fear. The scary part about it is that what they effectively, the 79% of the Democrats agreed with, is the policy that China did. China essentially, if somebody had COVID, now we're talking unvaccinated here, but if somebody had COVID initially, would literally nail their doors shut and not allow them to come out, and they would die in their apartments because you didn't get a chance to go out and get food. You weren't having food delivered. You didn't have water. You were basically cut off, shut off, and shut out. And you'd have pictures came out of China where people were just screaming and crying from their windows, trying to get somebody to come help them. And the government literally nailed them in their own homes, turning their own homes into tombs. So yeah, let's face it. When you talk about home confinement for people, when 50, what is it, 79% said they support home
59% of
59%.
Democrats favored home confinement for individuals not vaccinated.
It is pretty, it demonstrates the vitriol. It shows that the vitriol that you see online related against people who are not vaccinated, or against people who dare to say people should have a choice,
Right.
that vitriol is real. And and you see it with different, basic, athletes. We have Djokovic, the tennis player, best tennis player in the world, being deported from Australia because he's not vaccinated. You have and basically fought back against it. He's had the disease. He's like, I got natural immunity. They said, we don't care. So that seems for many people on the left and some on the right, that seems like a reasonable thing to do, right? We got to protect our society no matter what. Here's the fact, folks. Anthony Fauci said the other day, if you want to believe Anthony Fauci, believe this. He said the other day, everybody's getting Omicron. Okay? Everybody's getting Omicron. That's what he said. They can't stop it. There's nothing they can do. So when you get right down to it, if everybody's getting Omicron, and we know a certain a small percentage of people are going to die, and Omicron is going to be a spike, and it's begin to hit the top of the spike in terms of number of people sick. But it is a bottom line with it is, if you are prudent and careful and smart, you sit there and you put yourself in positions, vaccinated or not, that are going to lessen your chances of getting the disease. And if you feel bad about it, you start feeling bad, you're going to sit there and you're going to jump on it immediately. And hopefully, if these people were actually honest about what they want done, they should be the top people in all polls saying, we need treatments available to people regardless of their vaccination status, because if we can treat this thing, then COVID isn't death. The truth is, we can treat this thing. Everybody knows it. The Biden administration knows it. Everybody knows it. And the denial, the inability, the incompetence of the Biden administration in terms of even getting the treatment that was handed off to them in terms of the monoclonal antibody, which was developed under the Trump administration, to have shortages of that a year later is almost criminal negligence on the Biden's part.
Right.
So
Diana says mass formation psychosis for sure. I think a lot of us have been wondering if there is a mental illness component setting in with many of these far left Biden supporters, because clearly I think their position on these, shutting people in their homes is not based in the science for sure. It's certainly not based in the Constitution. I think these people just have left the mainstream of American thought. And by the way, Diana, it's a beautiful horse. I think that this is the frustration that President Trump is tapping into in going to Arizona, and hopefully he'll be doing more rallies like that. And I think that Americans want someone who is listening to them, who can relate to them. And that is not Biden. Joe Biden is a man who he kind of mumbles and stumbles his way through speeches. And when he does get fired up, he's not fired up sort of in defense of freedom or in defense of you and me. He's fired up to antagonize us and to demonize us. And it's just a terrible strategy. I mean, you've worked for an administration in the past. What is going on, do you think, inside the Biden White House right now? After last week was just a total disaster for Joe Biden. I mean, where do they go from here?
Well, that's a great question. They have a problem, okay? And I'm not stating this too. They have a lot of problems around the world, and they're incapable, and most of them are their own making. Every president faces a lot of challenges. It is a hard job. It is a very hard job. And so if you're robust and you're able to handle a lot of things, you're going to have as many things on your plate as you can handle. But If you're not, then you're sitting there and you get overwhelmed. And once you get overwhelmed, it's really hard to catch back up. The fact is, the Biden administration had its Katrina. The Biden administration's Katrina was Afghanistan. Afghanistan caused America to lose faith that we were going to abide by our own principles in terms of standing up for our own men and women in the armed services, but also those who've been our allies, those who put their livelihoods on the line, their lives on the line, to be our allies in country in Afghanistan. And when we abandoned those people, when we abandoned American citizens in Afghanistan, it basically broke Biden's capacity, the President Biden's capacity to legitimately talk about who America is. And so he has a problem. He can't communicate because of that. I'm not, all the other stuff aside, he can't communicate because of that, because people don't believe him. They don't trust him. So they can't communicate a message for that reason. Secondly, they have made a decision that they are going to go for the green agenda, the limiting America's growth, limiting America's greatness, trying to hamstring America with policies that take away our energy independence, that make us dependent upon the world, that put us into collaborative arrangements with people like Iran, who are using the fact that America stood down in the Middle East, using that as an excuse to go around and fund terrorist groups all over the Middle East aimed at taking down the Saudi and the Israeli government. That's the reality, and yet we're basically allowing that to occur. On inflation, it's almost as if they want inflation to be high. It's almost as if they want the system to break, because everything they do, it will create more inflation. The answer is you just do everything you can to increase the amount of diesel fuel. First of all, the amount of diesel fuel produced. You need the price of diesel fuel to go down. A. B. Stop spending. You need to rescind some of the spending that's already been approved, because right now we have a demand-driven inflationary cycle. Supply of goods is short, demand is high. We keep putting more money so people have the money to demand high goods, and so we're bidding the price of goods and services up. So you stop spending, stop pouring money into this economy.
Judy asks, this country cannot wait until 2024. Diana Mann made a similar point. She says, where do we go from here? Meaning we as the American people. A lot of Americans are very concerned that this country will not survive the next 3 years under Joe Biden. And I mean, great. What if we were to get President Trump back? That's still 3 years away. Can we survive these next 3 years under President Biden?
It's going to be a struggle. None of us can predict what happens in the future, but I don't think it's going to get easier. If anything, it'll get harder. You're going to see foreign policy problems and that are going to be fired up. Ukraine will probably be who knows what happens there. But if Putin presses his advantage in Ukraine, it suddenly becomes a big problem. Suddenly we have people in Poland who will be very concerned about their health, their ability to maintain their independence. The Balkans will be at risk. So you have a lot of dominoes that'll fall in places that, as Putin really tries to reestablish the USSR. China going after Taiwan. And further expanding their strength. They're building up of their navy and attempt to dominate South China Sea and the trade routes, so the Pacific trade routes. Pretty clear that China is going to try to do that, you need a strong president to stand up against it. The one thing we can do, and the reality is that you can bust your tail to create enough fear in the Democrats in Congress that they have to start standing up to Biden and slow down some of the nonsense he's doing, because knowing full well that if they don't, they're going to lose their seats. And while it seems that Congress is limited in what it can do, what it can do is it can put real strictures on the president and really define what the president needs to do on a whole variety of matters using the power of the purse. And that's exactly what they will need to do. They'll have to be aggressive. They'll have to be tough. They'll have to be willing to fight. And so for right now, within the system, the answer is make sure if you're voting for somebody for Congress, if you're voting for somebody for governor, if you're voting for somebody for state house, if you're voting for somebody for school board, if you're voting for somebody for county commission, make sure the people you vote for are willing to fight for freedom. Because if they're just going to be a get along, go along person, if they're just going to say, gee whiz, we, wait for 2 more years and when we get control, we'll try to do something, that person isn't the right person for the job. We have a fight right now. There's no really great answer to a president who's basically is incapable or unwilling to do his job. There's no really great answer when you have a vice president who is worse than the president. I would argue that the one advantage if Joe Biden were to be impeached now, were to leave office now, is that Kamala Harris would then no longer be VP. And so the Democrats wouldn't have the 51st vote in the Senate. And that would neuter his legislative agenda and would put the Republicans in a far stronger position in terms of stopping anything Biden would want legislatively, and perhaps force some of his appointees to be more centrist and less far left radicals. But yeah, it's a tough situation. When you sit there and you come to realize that the guy who you hired thinking, gee whiz, we thought at the very least he was just going to be a standard liberal Democrat. He'd do some bad stuff, but he wasn't going to try to lead a hate campaign against half the country. Right. And then you discover, oops, everybody he hired around him are radicals who all believe that the only way they can maintain power is by not only having a hate campaign, but by actually going and doing unthinkable things in terms of trying to attack their political opponents. And I wish I had a great answer, but unfortunately there's not one.
Well, I am excited to see Trump out doing rallies and speaking again. Does this mean that he is for sure going to run in 2024? No, we don't know that at this point, but certainly a lot of people are saying that it sounds like it. And in fact, I'm going to read to you something that he said at the rally. I wasn't able to find this clip right away, but he said at one point something that will be very encouraging to all of the Trump supporters out there. He said he was going to stage a comeback, the likes of which nobody has ever seen. So if you're a big Trump person, that's certainly encouraging to hear. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what he decides to do. But here at Americans for Limited Government, Rick was very clear about what we think his legislative agenda and priorities should be if he does run again, looking at draining the swamp, free trade issues, cutting the spending, securing our border with Mexico. Are there any I missed, Rick? Any other big ones that we think?
Yeah, on trade, I didn't say free trade. I said trade issues, Trump trade issues, which means getting tough on China and trying to get supply chains moved to this side of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
But there's one thing that is really, really important, folks. Engagement, your engagement, is what makes the next 3 years, gives us a chance to win the next 3 years. Your engagement now is an investment in the next year in terms of getting a responsive Congress, and the following 2 years to try to get a government that actually will reflect American values. And it's frustrating to be engaged. It's hard to be engaged. Sometimes, there's not a lot of good answers, but you still have to push forward. And, sometimes you look at things, you say, why is this happening? But I know that America is the greatest country ever conceived on this earth. I know that the American ideal is worth fighting for. And I know that on my watch, we will not surrender that ideal. We may not may not be able to keep it. We may not be able to live up to it. We may even lose it, but we will never surrender it. So stay engaged and do not surrender and keep the faith, because America's great, God is good, and those two things go together.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Let me just take down some of these banners. And if you like what we're talking about here, you want to be a part of Americans for Limited Government, simply follow us on YouTube. So subscribe to our channel, hit the little bell so that you get notifications of when we go live, and just, look for our daily live streams and the other videos that we produce. We really want to have as many of you as possible as part of this team and fighting with us. And we're just so grateful to all of you who do participate, take action, and really help us, as Rick said, just to stay engaged, because I think that that's what's going to make the difference over the next 3 years. So,
and folks, nobody needs to send in any remarks saying I need to get a haircut. I can see on the screen that I do need to get a haircut. So maybe next time we do this, some of this stuff will be gone. So with that, guys, have a great day. We will see you tomorrow.